Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the dense, high-stakes language behind modern corporate staffing. If you spend any time in the corporate strategy space, or honestly, if your own career has ever been impacted by a company's hiring or freezing decisions, you know that managing human capital often feels like more of an art than a science. For decades, leaders just relied on gut feelings, historical precedents, and, let's face it, educated guesses to figure out who should be working where and when. But the source material we're digging into today, it completely flips that script. We're looking at a highly concentrated, incredibly powerful blueprint for how organizations operate right now. This isn't just theory, it's the mathematical foundation of modern employment, and understanding it gives you a massive advantage in navigating today's corporate landscape. Let's get into it.
So, can a company actually predict its own future? Let's dive into this intriguing question by examining a single, incredibly concentrated statement about workforce strategy. Traditionally, businesses have looked backward to figure out what they need going forward, right? Like in the past, if a company sold 10% more widgets last year, they just blindly assumed, okay, we need to hire 10% more salespeople for next year. It was entirely reactive. But what if a company didn't have to guess? What if they could literally map out their exact structural future before it even happens? Well, that is the exact promise embedded in the text we're breaking down today.
What is workforce analytics?
Now notice how much heavy lifting these 25 words are doing to explain the transition from guesswork to mathematical foresight. The text states, workforce planning analytics uses predictive models to forecast staffing needs, attrition, and demand. I want you to read that again. Notice how it doesn't say it estimates or guesses. It says it uses predictive models to forecast. This single sentence represents a massive paradigm shift in business. It takes this deeply human, often unpredictable element of a company, its workforce, and subjects it to rigorous, forward-looking analysis. By framing human capital in these terms, organizations are essentially declaring that the future of their workforce is something that can be calculated, prepared for, and ultimately managed with true mathematical precision.
So, workforce planning analytics acts as the foundational tool for everything we're about to discuss. Think of this as the overarching system, the massive umbrella under which all these complex calculations live. Without the specific analytics framework in place, an organization is essentially flying blind. Individual departments end up getting rained on by unexpected staffing shortages or sudden budget constraints simply because they lacked a unified protective strategy. Workforce planning analytics provides that exact shelter. It forces the whole company to operate from a single, unified mathematical playbook, which totally shifts the culture. You go from reacting to crises after they've already disrupted the workflow to actually anticipating those shifts way in advance.
Section 2. The power of predictive models.
The source text explicitly states that workforce planning analytics uses predictive models to generate its forecasts, turning what could be a wild guessing game into a calculated projection. These models are literally the secret sauce of modern corporate strategy, and frankly, the sheer rigor of the math involved here is fascinating. They don't just look at a single data point. No, they take historical data, current market trends, and complex structural mathematics, and they weave all of these distinct threads together to project a highly probable future state. They are the engine. They're the mechanism that gives the analytics its actual predictive power, transforming raw, messy data into a clear window looking straight into next year's corporate environment.
Now, you might be wondering, what exactly are these models forecasting? And how in the world do we apply these rigid predictive models to something as complex and messy as human behavior within a company? I mean, it's one thing to predict how much physical inventory you might need for the holiday season, right? Those are inanimate objects. It is quite another to predict the fluid dynamics of a living, breathing workforce where people have personal lives, career ambitions, and changing motivations. So where exactly is the source material pointing these powerful mathematical lenses to capture all that human complexity?
Section 3. Forecasting attrition and demand.
The text breaks the forecast down into three distinct categories: staffing needs, attrition, and demand. This specific framework makes a really dense concept feel like a highly structured, multi-tiered strategy. Let's look at how this operates in practice. The models aren't just broadly throwing out a number and guessing, hey, how many people do we need? Instead, they're triangulating the future. By looking independently at staffing needs, calculating the rate of attrition, and mapping out overarching demand, these models create a full three-dimensional view of the company's future reality. For a business leader, this means you aren't just seeing a flat snapshot. You're looking at a dynamic, moving model of exactly how your workforce will need to evolve over the next 12 to 18 months.
You know, the analytics aren't just about who is coming into the company. They're specifically designed to predict who is leaving. People retire, people move on to other career opportunities, people relocate for personal reasons. That is attrition. By modeling this specifically, the analytic system acknowledges a fundamental truth. A workforce is essentially a leaking bucket. You cannot effectively plan your future if you don't mathematically anticipate how much talent will naturally flow out of your organization. Understanding this expected outflow allows a company to proactively prepare replacements and succession plans rather than scrambling in a total panic when key personnel inevitably hand in their notice.
Now, balancing out that natural attrition, the model simultaneously forecasts the upcoming demand and the corresponding staffing needs required to meet it. This is the other crucial side of the equation. Demand tells you what the business will require to function at its peak, like maybe a new software product launch requires 50% more engineering support. Staffing needs then quantifies exactly what human capital is required to fulfill that demand, all while taking into account the holes left by the attrition we just talked about. It's designed to be a perfectly balanced equation, and this matters immensely to anyone working today, because when this equation is out of balance, the results are disastrous. Too little staffing leads to massive employee burnout and missed deadlines. Too much staffing leads to wasted capital and inevitable layoffs. These models exist to keep that scale perfectly centered.
Section 4. Strategic allocation and cost control.
Okay, this entire exercise of predicting needs, attrition, and demand exists to support two massive corporate outcomes. The source text explicitly states that this analytics framework supports strategic workforce allocation and cost control. This is the ultimate payoff of everything we've discussed so far. You don't run millions of data points through complex predictive models just for the sake of having interesting charts in a boardroom. You run them so you can physically move the pieces on the board in the real world. That is what strategic allocation means. And you do it so you can keep the corporate budget from spiraling totally out of control. These two pillars are the real-world application of all that theoretical math.
This is a dual benefit. You're perfectly balancing the human element of strategic allocation on one side with the cold, hard financial mandate of cost control on the other. Think of it as a massive, high-stakes scale. On one side, strategic workforce allocation ensures the right people with the exact right skills are sitting in the right seats at the exact right time to capture market demand. It's all about maximizing potential. But on the other side of that scale, without cost control, achieving that perfect allocation could literally bankrupt a company. By utilizing these predictive models, a business ensures that they're deploying their talent in the most highly optimized, financially disciplined way possible. It eliminates blind waste while maximizing human output.
So, if predictive models control costs and forecast demand, is the future of work already decided? I'll leave you with that thought to wrap up our explainer on workforce planning analytics, inviting you to ponder just how predictable human capital has truly become. When we distill the messy, complicated reality of a workforce down to analytics, attrition forecasts, and cost control models, it reveals a hyper-efficient landscape. A landscape where tomorrow's staffing decisions, career trajectories, and organizational shifts are being mathematically solved today. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the underlying architecture of modern workforce strategy. Catch you next time.